Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay. So we are watching some scary or spooky videos, however you would like to call it today. I have a few videos I want to watch. It depends if we have time for it or not today. We'll see though. Probably look at the chart in the same time, but the videos, but from time to time, in between, I'll come to stream and talk to you guys. So let's see. It's in 1 second. Okay, watch later. Okay, I got it. Okay, got it. Sorry. Now.
For Monday.com, our department was already able to connect our processes, our software, actually everything into one centralized.
I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the typical car websites, cars.com, eBay Motors. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. About a week into my search, I found an 03 Toyota Camry. It had 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and good condition for only $3,500. This seemed like a steal for such a reliable car with such low mileage.
Okay. Who's just turning on and off? Absolutely no idea why.
The seller lived about 10 miles from me, which was a reasonable drive when looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He assured me there were absolutely no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as much as
Sort of fucking good. There's something wrong with this console. One more time turns on.
Brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as much as possible.
Okay.
I pulled up the dirt road to Bob's property about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent-sized property, only because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, so I looked over to see if anyone was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car on the property was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the front door. I knocked every once in a while for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call. So I dialed his number, and I heard the sound of his phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house. I didn't understand why, if he was home, why he wasn't answering.
I mean, it could be a
I decided I
coincidence.
had to take a peek through
Sure.
one of the windows to see if anyone was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't really see much as it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a very old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that, I saw somebody standing at the back door of the house, staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob, so I knocked on the window, but he didn't even move. There was no gate or anything to the backyard. It was just a wide open yard since this wasn't a rural area. I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking realization. The figure standing by the door was a taxidermied human being.
Oh, what?
I ran straight back the way I came and back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The blinds to the window I had peeked into had been shut. Looked up one last figure standing by the door was a taxidermied human being. I ran straight back the way I came and back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The
I'm not
blinds to the
laughing,
window I
I'm
had
just
peeked into
laughing
had been shut,
about
but I
myself.
could see two of
I
the
don't
blinds creased
understand.
open. Somebody was at that window, watching me. You could probably guess I had the gas pedal to the floor the whole way home. The whole situation still makes no sense. All the car parts, the fact that there was no Toyota Camry, the taxidermied human being. Given that there was no car there, leads me to believe that whoever that man was wasn't planning on selling me anything. And that also leads me to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out that man's back door.
Okay. I mean, it's a nice story. It's an interesting story. I'll honestly give it like 7 out of 10. Yeah. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not bad good either. I don't know.
This happened when I was really little and often left alone with my single mom. She always came to check on me every night when she would get up to go to the bathroom. This one night in particular, I remember waking up thinking I heard something in my closet. I looked up and my mom was at the foot of my bed giving me a playful wave.
Oh,
She told me to go back to sleep. She then went into my closet and pulled the door until it was just barely open, and she just stood in there, poking her head through the crack of the barely open closet. I remember vividly seeing her eye peeking through the crack at me. I laughed like any little kid would do in that situation, and then fell asleep moments later. When I was eating cereal the next morning, I asked my mom why she was hiding in my closet last night, and she just stopped and gave me a puzzled and concerned look. She told me she hadn't been in the room all night. At first, she assumed somebody had broken into the house, but she soon realized it was some kind of hallucination or dream. Since this experience, I've only had 2 other hallucinations, neither of them as vivid or as creepy as this one.
yeah. Come on, of course it's about an AI too. Let's find the story, come on. Don't like when we're so short. I don't like when we're so short. Okay, but let's continue. I rate this also a 4 out of 10. It was okay, but I think it would have been better if he continued it a little more. It would have been better.
In the year 2009, I was spending a weekend with my uncle on his ranch when my parents were renovating the new house we had just bought. It was my second night there, a Saturday, and it happened to be during one of the biggest thunderstorms of the year. I'd say there were at least 3 crashes of thunder and lightning per minute. And we were in the heart of the storm
minute.
because the thunder would crash not even a second.
Where I'm from, when there are thunderstorms, there's probably 1 or 2, like a few, like on top like 5, and then it's done. It's pretty rare. I never heard of 3 thunders per minute. Damn.
And after the
So-
lightning would. I always enjoyed listening to storms while laying in bed, so I stayed up a little later watching TV, just enjoying the ambiance. After the movie I was watching finally ended, I turned off the TV and tried to fall asleep.
Yeah.
As I heard the lightning strike from outside, I could have sworn I heard some kind of metallic thud coming from outside at the same time. I didn't pay it too much mind. 20 seconds later,
Was it a
I could have sworn I heard it again. A very distinct metallic thud coming from outside to match the timing of the lightning. I really don't mean to make this sound like a cliche horror story, but my uncle really is a kind of creepy guy, and I was never close with him, even remotely. So for that reason, I didn't feel right going to wake him up. I just tried to forget about it. Now I was
like
getting
a
concerned.
gunshot.
What the hell could that be? After the third time, I finally got out of bed and walked over.
Like a gunshot bumping into a pan. Sounds similar because I played PUBG and stuff like that. So it sounds similar, like in PUBG when a gunshot bumps into a pan. So it's about the same.
Over to the window of the guest bedroom. The water pouring down on the window made it extra hard to see what was out there in the dark fields. A flash of lightning momentarily lit up the property, but I couldn't see anything. However, once again, the sound of a metal hit accompanied it. The sound was so close now, it sounded like it was coming from the left of the window at a blind spot. I was going to do something I knew my uncle wouldn't be happy about. It would be a bit messy, but I was going to open the window and peer outside to see if I could see what the sound was. I unhooked the window lock and slid it up, and immediately the...
Also, if I heard that sound, I don't know what hold it, but there's nothing easy to do, okay? And what opening the window door is even worse.
The wind of the storm blew drops of rain into the room and onto me. I stuck my head out the window and looked to the left, and at that very moment, lightning lit up the property once again, and I could see a person dressed in all black crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air. And before the sky went dark, I caught the briefest glimpse of what the sound was coming from. The person was bashing at the basement door lock. I pulled my head in and quietly shut the window, making sure to lock it. I was in a panic. I feared he might have seen or heard me. I ran back to bed and pretended to be asleep, facing away from the window. Lightning crashed once again, but this time there was no metallic thud. My heart must have dropped as I realized this. I just stayed put in bed for the longest time, hoping whoever was out there would go away. After maybe 3 more lightning crashes without any thuds accompanying them, I thought it would be safe to go tell my uncle. I turned to face the window and screamed. There was a figure, clear as day, standing at the window, looking in at me.
Yeah.
I screamed as loud as I could and ran straight to my uncle's room. He went outside with his hunting rifle, with nothing on but his pajamas, not even socks. He ran around the entire property yelling like a madman, but didn't find anyone. The next morning, we were able to better see the marks on the basement door lock. It was almost bashed open. Maybe 3 or 4 more good hits would have done it, according to my uncle. He was proud of me for picking up on it. Luckily, I was out of there that same day. My uncle hasn't told us of any incidents since, so I think he's been okay. Not that we talked to him much at all. I'm grateful I stayed up a little later that night watching that movie, because I may have just stopped a robbery, or possibly much worse.
Much worse. Mark my words. That was actually a good one. I liked it. I'll give it like a solid 9 out of 10. But it was a good story, actually. I liked it.
I don't care if anyone judges me, but I like to go to the movie theaters alone. My work schedule is all over the place. I often don't
Done
work
it a few
weeknights.
times. Like
So I want
not once or twice to the arcade. I was in the cinema. Okay, I just went to the cinemas once or twice alone. Yeah, wasn't I don't really like it. It's better when you go with people to a cinema. But I think he's talking about an arcade.
stormy Wednesday night. Work schedule is all over the place. I often don't work, but I like to go to the movie theaters alone.
Yeah, okay.
My work
so
schedule is all
movie,
over the
okay.
place. I often don't.
Okay, I get it. So yeah, I also went a few times alone, but it's more fun to go with people, in my opinion. Okay, so
Don't work weeknights. So on a stormy Wednesday night, a night not many other people would be thinking to go drive to a movie theater, I did just that. I always like avoiding crowds in anything I do. That's just how I am. It was 2017. I went to see some low-key movie that probably wasn't at the top of most people's must-see movie lists. I was the only one in the theater, just like I expected. I sat myself right in the center seat of one of the higher up rows and put my feet up on the seat in front of me. About 20 minutes into the movie, I'd say, I noticed someone a few aisles down. I didn't notice them coming in. The theater was dark because the scene in the movie at the time was in a dark room. They weren't sitting in a seat like a normal person, though. All I saw of them was the top half of their head, peering over one of the seats to be looking in a direction that definitely was not the screen. It was still too dark to be able to tell if they were looking directly at me or not, but when the scene changed to a brighter background, the whole theater got brighter. Bright enough to see they were looking basically at me. Their face was so pale and lifeless looking, and their hair messy and wiry looking. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman.
AP.
I'm an introvert, or just an awkward person, so I didn't really want to ask if there was something wrong. I viewed that as confrontation. The screen went darker again, and at the same time, the person lowered down behind the chair completely until I couldn't see them anymore. They were completely hidden from my view. I couldn't concentrate on the movie
That's
now,
weird.
though. I was actually very uncomfortable, actually quite terrified. I didn't get up, though. I stayed put in my seat. Many scenes in the movie passed. I almost forgot about what happened. Almost. Just when I was getting back into the movie, the person's head appeared from behind a seat again, this time much closer, only like 3 rows of seats away from me. I actually let out a holy shit and a loud yell because it genuinely made me jump. Now I was able to see more detail or features in their face.
Now I'm wondering what movie he's watching. I'm also one. What's also make me a bit wondering about it.
They actually looked lifeless, their eyes motionless, hung open. But still,
Is
I
it
somehow
man or
couldn't
woman?
tell if they were looking directly at me or not. Now I could better see it was a man with long, unkempt hair. I noped the F out of my seat and down the road to the exit. I had to pass the row in which the person was in to get to the exit door. As I passed the row, I looked down it, and while I expected to see the rest of the person's body sitting hunched behind the seats, instead what I saw was something you'd see in a nightmare. There was some guy basically laying on the floor, holding up a severed head perched on a stick. I didn't stick around to see if it was some sick joke or if the head was real or not. I ran for it through the exit door, and I ran out of the back exit of the building to the parking lot. I drove home in a panic, heart racing. The
Damn.
head looked so real. I got home and did some research about
It
possible
gives me
recent murders
chills.
or missing people in the
Fun
area, and I found something. After browsing a list of missing people in the area, I found a picture of a 17-year-old boy named Donald Watkins who had gone missing a month prior. And based on the picture I found, his face could have matched the head I saw in that theater. Of course, that could be my brain trying to connect any similarities. But the hair, the nose, the eyes, they looked like they could actually be a match. The next day, I simply made a call to the theater and told them the story and suggested they check their cameras and see if anything strange came up. I gave them my number to reach me if they needed to, but I never heard from them. I chose to not spend any more of my time on it.
Okay, I mean, that was a good one. I have to give him that. That was a good one. Ooh, okay, okay, that was good. Let's see, I forgot. To rate it. That's also like 9, 8.5. Yeah, I'll give it 8.5. But it's pretty good. I like it.
A long time ago, I very briefly lived with my good friend Ben on a quiet street in Northville, Michigan, perhaps notable for being close to Detroit. It wasn't the nicest house, or block, or area for that matter, but the price was unbeatable for two broke young men like ourselves. Ben and I went way back to when we were like 9 years old, and at the time of this story, we worked the same job, and rooming together with him seemed like a great idea. On our first day there, we quickly figured out that the creepy looking house across the street with the overgrown grass and bushes was abandoned, as were a lot of the houses around the area. In fact,
Okay.
something we somehow hadn't noticed before, there was even graffiti next to one of the front windows and on the fence. Our neighbors on
Okay.
one side seemed like creeps, and we didn't even want to approach them. The neighbor on the other side was an older dude, a very interesting, hippie-ish kind of guy. His name was Marv. He had long gray hair with a matching long gray beard. He seemed friendly at first, I guess, but also very weird and hard to talk to. We spoke with him on our second day there after work. He told us the place had been abandoned for as long as he could remember.
Mhm.
That night, with the sun almost set, while we were sitting on the front stoop smoking, I looked to the house across the street and felt a little tingle in my stomach out of shock. I stood up, threw my cigarette onto the floor, and crushed it. Ben looked at me confused, and I pointed to the window across the street. I
What
was
was it?
pointing at a face, which I saw staring at me through the lone upstairs window of the
Person.
house. Do you see that? There's someone at that window. Ben looks at the window immediately, but I saw the person move their head away before he could see it.
Uh,
It's weird. I explained to Ben that I didn't even know if it was a male or female, old or young. The
okay.
glass was just too foggy. All I knew was that I saw the eyes, and they were staring at us. Ben told me I was legitimately creeping him out. He believed me. We ran over to Marv's house to tell him, but strangely, he didn't answer his door, even though we saw him watching TV in his tiny, messy living room through the window. The fact that the guy wouldn't answer creeped us out even more. Dude, what the fuck is going on with this place? Ben laughed, but the
I would
situation
laugh.
couldn't stay comical for long. Ben owned a katana. He brought it to mention and suggested we go across the street with it, break into the house from the backyard, and see what was going on. We were always adventurous, daring troublemakers as kids, so this was our natural response to the situation.
Okay.
When it got dark, we went across the street to the backyard, broke off the board holding the back door shut, and entered the house. We both had heavy-duty flashlights with us to light up basically any room we were in. The house was dusty, decrepit, but surprisingly seemed to remain untouched from the inside. No graffiti or signs of vandalism
That's
anywhere.
weird.
Still, the place was disturbingly creepy, and we immediately joked that we should get the fuck out of there. But we pressed on. The first floor was pathetically small, like our own. A kitchen, a tiny living room, and a dining room. There was no basement and one closet. The first floor was clear. We both agreed to check the upstairs. We tiptoed over to the stairs, and Ben, out of nowhere, screamed, "Is anybody up there?" "Dude, why the fuck would you do that?" I said quietly.
True.
Then we both froze in fear when we heard rapid stomping suddenly appear from above us. It was someone heavy, and it sounded like they were running over to the stairway. I literally felt like my heart stopped. Ben, the one with the katana, was the first to flee, grabbing my arm and tugging me with him. We went out the way we entered and ran back to the house, where we saw Marv just standing by his window, watching us. We didn't know what to do. He just intently stared at us as we froze to catch our breath in front of the house. We went inside, decided not to call the police, and moved out literally the next day. We explained to the landlord that the location was just too inconvenient for us, and we needed to leave ASAP. We drove away from that house and never looked back.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, it's a nice one. Yeah, definitely nice one. I'll give it like a 7.5. I mean, it's not that bad. It's just I think the other one so kind of better, a little bit better. Yeah. So okay, let's continue to the last story.
For my son's 12th birthday, my wife and I threw him a little party in the backyard. We invited the whole family, as we usually did for any of our kids' birthdays, and let him invite all of his friends too. We live in rural New Jersey, so our backyard connects to forest on 2 sides. We also have a pretty big property, which allowed us to space out a bunch of tables on the grass with food and refreshments. The little party went into the night. Most of our guests left, but closer family and some of our friends stayed late. It was probably 8 o'clock. The mosquitoes were out in full force, so I decided to run over to the shed at the far end of the backyard by the woods to fetch the tiki torches. I grabbed like 6 torches and set them on the grass while I went back in to look for fuel. However, while I was in the shed, I heard steps in the woods. I stopped what I was doing to take a look out there, but honestly, it was just too dark to see out into the woods. After finding the fuel, I went back to the part of the yard everyone else was at and pitched the torches into the ground. The 6 torches gave off a decent amount of light while keeping us safe from the blood-sucking pests. There were about 6 kids left, including my son, and they all wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. My wife and I allowed it, just making sure to tell them to stay close to the tree line. My son and his friends went to play their little game in the woods, which left the rest of us to sit in peace for a little bit.
That's not a good idea. That's dumb, especially if you heard steps in the woods. Okay. And even worse, in the night time. Okay. That's okay. It can only mean one thing. But bad news. Bad news. So that's all a good idea. Okay.
It was a solid 15 minutes of talking with relatives and hearing the kids laughing and yelling in the near distance out in the woods. But all of a sudden, yelling turned to screams, concerning sounding screams from the kids. All of us looked at each other, sitting up in concern. The kids one by one came running out of the woods, yelling that there's something in there. We don't have bears or any big predatory animals around here, so that was not the first thing we assumed.
So he heard steps. I mean, it kind of makes sense now. I mean, if it, it's kind of confusing now, because if he heard like steps that were like human steps, even oh my god, his father is one of his battalion verse toys. It like dummy, but if it was an animal steps, okay, I will then understand more. But yeah, so it all depends what type of like steps did he hear.
It to be. I told all the kids to stay near the patio area. My brother Dom and I, being the biggest men there, decided to go investigate. We took a couple flashlights and off we went into the pitch black woods. The only sounds we heard were flashlights, and off we went into the pitch black woods. The only sounds we heard around us were crickets and other night bugs. So we went deeper, and that's when we started to hear something else. It sounded like an animal at first, but as we followed the sound to get closer, the sound started to become more human-like. We continued to walk, and we agreed we both had the feeling that we were being
It's
watched,
a video
like
too.
stalked. I put my arm out to stop Dom. Standing in the silence now, the best way I could describe the sound we were hearing was a moaning, angry kind of sound. It sounded human, but it was a bizarre sound. Then, a few cracks of the leaves on the ground ahead of us. We aimed our lights over there, and there was someone or something behind the tree. The moaning sound stopped. Dom stepped forward and called out. What happened next was textbook horror movie stuff.
Ah,
A scream, so loud, so blood-curdling, so inhuman, filled the air. I'm sure it could be heard for miles. Dom and I turned and booked it back to the property. We waved at everyone to go inside when we made it back. Dom got on the phone with the sheriff's department. They said it was probably a wild animal. We wanted to insist it was a human, but we honestly couldn't. We to this day don't know who or what we saw and heard in those woods, but it was definitely stalking us and the kids when they were playing hide and seek. And that scream we heard
yeah, I'll
just didn't sound human to us.
I'll just put a fence. Oh, that's okay, that's a bit
I need to find the best way.
okay. I will just build a huge fence around like near the tree line. To be honest, I don't care how much it costs. But yeah, okay, it was a good one.
Way to learn math and science.
I will give it like
It's brilliant.org.
Whoa.
this is
Brilliant has thousands of.
I have to start.
First of all, this was the last one that we watched before. Okay, let's see. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. It was probably the last one was, but like really good. Actually think it was one of the best ones in the video. So yeah. Like that. I also need to not at the same time. So it's also nice. Did a bit of progress. Okay. Now, so let's go to the next one. Hope you actually can hear me. I'll probably check it later. But okay, yeah. Sure. Okay, I'm gonna just
Start today's video with a disclaimer. Don't go to Dudleytown, Connecticut. This is not a prank, it's not a stunt, it's not clickbait, it's the truth. I'm confident that at the end of this video, there are going to be people that want to go. Don't do it. One, it's illegal to go to Dudleytown, it's private property.
Let's go
And
then.
two, as you'll see in today's video, there is a reason why people abandoned Dudleytown. It is not a safe place for people. But before we get into the story about Dudleytown, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button is playing an intense
Oh,
game
by
of
the way.
online FIFA, wait until
Last video was by Mr. Nightmare. Shout out to him. Not that he really I have anyone to show him. Don't think anyone is actually watching, but shouts out to him. Before I forget, also Mr. Bolan. That's the name of this channel.
they get the lead and then unplug their Wi-Fi. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. It was a bright summer day in 1906, and Dr. William C. Clark and his wife Harriet were driving slowly through a beautiful part of northwestern Connecticut called Litchfield County. Litchfield is a rural, very hilly area with lots of winding country roads, and the Clarks were there to try to scout out an area to build their second home. The couple lived full-time in New York City, where Dr. Clark was an oncologist, which is a cancer doctor, and he was also a professor at the Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons. And while the Clarks' lives were very exciting and fulfilling in the city, they were also very hectic and chaotic. And so the reason they had settled on Litchfield as the place to look for a location for their second home is because it was the total opposite of the city. It was quiet, it was peaceful, it was perfect. And so as this couple from New York City drove along these winding backcountry roads, they eventually reached this beautiful covered wooden bridge. And after they drove across it, they got this view up onto this mountainside off to their right. And high up on this mountain was this huge, shaded, beautiful forest. And they saw there was a road that appeared to kind of spider off and go into these woods. Now, the couple had no idea what was up there, but it was just so beautiful, and they were immediately so drawn to it that they decided they would go check it out and see if maybe there was a spot for their second home in these woods. And so Dr. Clark took the car and he went up this access road, and very quickly, as they began climbing up this hillside, the road became very bumpy and overgrown. It was pretty obvious that not many cars were driving into these woods. And so before they even reached the tree line, Dr. Clark had to pull the car over and park it on the side of the road. And then he and Harriet got out, and then on foot, they continued up towards the forest. And once the couple actually entered the forest, immediately the sunlight faded because the canopy over their heads was so thick, and the air became cool and refreshing. And after walking for only a couple of minutes, the forest, which at first seemed very still and quiet, suddenly became alive. They could hear birds chirping and animals running around and insects buzzing. And then up ahead, they saw there was this field off to the side of the road that was full of all these wild apple trees growing.
I love how he uses his hands to express, like, I mean, it's kind of
in all
nice,
different directions.
you know.
And as they got closer, they saw there was just a
like it.
deer right in the middle of the apple trees eating apples directly
Not
off the
trying to make
branches.
fun
And
of
then
it,
just
just-
past all these apple trees, the couple began passing these huge, beautiful patches of roses and lilacs and bright yellow bitter tansy flowers that lined the road. And then before long, the couple was stepping over these babbling brooks, and off in the distance, they could hear the sound of running water, like fresh spring water coming down off the
Actually,
mountain.
sounds
And then
nice.
as the sun did begin to poke through the canopy above them, it almost looked like the forest was sparkling, literally. This forest was sitting on a hillside, and the hillside, which was made up of rock, had mica inside of it. And mica is a kind of mineral that when sunlight hits it, it almost looks like it's shimmering. And of course, there were the owls. As Dr. Clark and his wife walked farther and farther into this beautiful forest, they heard more and more owls hooting off in the distance. And to the Clarks, this made the forest feel enchanted. It was like the owls were personally greeting them. By the time the couple had turned around and begun heading back to their car, they had already made up their mind that they were going to build their second home in that forest. And so, after returning to their home in New York, they promptly put in the paperwork to purchase 1,000 acres inside of that Connecticut forest. And that forest had a name. It was called Dark Entry, and it was named that because it looked like from the outside, the forest was basically dark all the time. There was shade cast on it from mountains nearby, and then also the canopy inside of Dark Entry is exceptionally thick. At one time, there actually had been a town inside of Dark Entry Forest. However, all the people who had lived in that town were now all gone. The only remnants of this town were a couple of crumbling stone walls and a couple of home foundations that were scattered about the Dark Entry forest floor. The Clarks had seen some of these ruins as they walked along this overgrown path through the forest, but they weren't concerned. Instead, they felt like these ruins actually added some charm to the forest. After the land purchase was finalized, Dr. Clark began looking for local builders in Connecticut who could help him build this second home inside of Dark Entry Forest. But no matter how much money he offered these local Connecticut builders, they all said no. Now, none of them gave a straight answer to Dr. Clark about why they were turning him down. So Dr. Clark just kind of assumed that, hey, this project is not huge. It's just one house. And the forest is pretty isolated and hard to get to. And so he thought, probably these builders think it's not worth the effort. But Dr. Clark was not discouraged. He decided he would just build the house himself. After all, he was a very handy, competent guy who had grown up on a farm in New Jersey, and so he knew how to build things. And so for the next several months, Dr. Clark would travel from New York City to Dark Entry Forest every week.
It's almost in my opinion, but I will still look. Okay, but it's because also I'm pretty lazy, so it's also because of that probably.
And he would build this home. First, he cut down this massive swath of hemlock trees on this one flat patch of his land. And then with all this lumber he had cut down, he built his rustic 2-story cabin on this flat part of his land. And then nearby on this hilltop, there was a freshwater spring at the top. And so he laid piping from the spring into his cabin so they could have fresh water. And then at the bottom of this nearby hill was this brook. And Dr. Clark loved just standing and watching this brook because inside of it were all these trout that would dart all around. And so Dr. Clark built a swimming pool with beautiful mossy embankments right up against this brook so he could sit there and watch the fish. By Thanksgiving of that year, the cabin was done, and so Dr. Clark and his wife Harriet, they stayed at the cabin to celebrate the holiday. And as they were sitting in their swimming pool, watching the trout and listening to the owls hoot off in the distance, they both agreed that this second home was like their little piece of heaven. So every summer from there on out, and every major holiday that they could manage it, the Clarks would travel to their home in Dark Entry Forest, and they would swim and hike and relax, and they'd watch the leaves on the mountainside turn from green to bright yellows and oranges and reds. It was perfect. That is, until 1918. That summer, the couple was in their second home in the forest when
1918 is when the war won. Okay.
Dr. Clark was suddenly called back to New York to attend to a medical emergency. Harriet was very upset at the prospect of suddenly being left alone in this cabin in the middle of the forest by herself for who knows how many days. And so when she dropped her husband off at the nearby train platform, she made him promise that he would come back soon. And he said he would. And then Dr. Clark got on the train, it took off, and Harriet just stood there with her arms crossed, watching it as it chugged along off into the distance. From his comfortable seat on that train, Dr. Clark had...
She could have come with him. Okay. She could have done it. I mean, it probably would have cost more, with train tickets and all, but I guess, no.
Had no idea that his wife was about to endure a nightmare while he was gone. We've all been there. Your guests are on their way over to your house for your big New Year's Eve party, and right as they pull into your driveway, you realize you've overnogged your smoked chicken gallbladder egg.
Okay, wait 1 minute. I need to... Yeah. So I just need to take the charger out of this. Okay. So, here we go. Let's continue.
Eggnog. And so with minutes to spare, you leap out of the window, shattering the glass and cutting yourself up badly. And then you jog up to Canada and dive into Baffin Bay, and you jump on top of a narwhal. And after some intense underwater hand to flipper combat, you take its horn off its head and you beat it to death. You take its horn, and then you swim back to land, and you jog back to your house, and you leap in through a different window, shattering the glass. And then after you stand up, you make your way into the kitchen, and you whip up a quick narwhal.
Sounds more like a adventure movie than a horror movie. Like horror adventurous video than a horror video.
Horn
Okay.
iced soup right as your guests are walking through the front door.
Such a
Crisis averted,
dramatic.
right? Wrong. Smoked chicken gallbladder eggnog and narwhal horn iced soup are both just gross. So your party was doomed either way. But you know what
What?
isn't gross? HelloFresh. HelloFresh
Oh.
is
Sponsor.
America's with over 35 family-friendly guides, upgraded years. HelloFresh can accommodate. So if you're ready to stop garnishing your holiday
I haven't realized it was an ad until, he said, oh, this is HelloFresh. Yeah.
When the Clarks bought their 1,000 acres in the Dark Entry Forest, they did virtually no research on the forest or the surrounding area. If they had, they very likely would not have purchased that land. You see, the town that used to be inside of the Dark Entry Forest, that was now just ruins that the Clarks saw when they first walked around inside of the forest, was abandoned for a very specific reason. It was cursed. At least that's what the locals say. And in fact, that was the reason why no builders in the area were willing to go with Dr. Clark into the forest to
Maybe
go build
from
his
that
house,
side,
because they were
could
too
have asked.
scared to go anywhere near the ruins of this cursed town. This town, which was known as Dudleytown, was first settled sometime in the 1740s. At first, it was just a couple of people and a couple of small structures, but pretty quickly, 30 families had moved in, and it was a thriving little town. But as the 1700s came to a close, terrible things began to happen to residents of this town. First, there was the Carter family. They moved to Dudleytown in 1759, and shortly after arriving there, 6 members of their family all died suddenly from cholera. The remaining branch of the Carter family was so grief-stricken from their losses that they left Dudleytown and went to New York, where they resettled. But almost immediately after getting set up there, Native Americans raided their property and massacred them, and the 3 people that survived this massacre were 3 of the kids, and they were all kidnapped and taken away. In 1792, a Dudley resident named Hollister died suddenly. Now, we don't know if he fell off a roof or if he was murdered. No one really knows. But what we can agree on is that his untimely death happened in the home of a man named Tanner. And Tanner, following Hollister's death, suddenly just began obsessively talking about these strange creatures he was seeing out in the woods at night, kind of roaming around the Dark Entry Forest. And he talked about it all the time, and nobody listened to him. And eventually, Tanner went insane, and his daughter had to care for him for the rest of his life. And while Tanner was slowly losing his mind, his next-door neighbor, named Abel, also began reporting that he was seeing weird creatures roaming around the tree line all around the town. And as Abel continued to report seeing these strange creatures lurking in the shadows, he too slowly went mad and had to be cared for until his death. In the early 1800s, a famous Revolutionary War hero, General Herman Swift, who lived in Dudleytown, lost his mind shortly after his wife was struck by lightning. And then in 1813, an unknown epidemic rolled through Dudleytown and killed many of its residents. After that, more and more residents of Dudleytown either died suddenly or died mysteriously, and also more and more residents began coming forward with stories about having seen these strange, shadowy creatures moving around the tree line at night. By about 1900, all the Dudleytown residents had either died or simply just left, abandoning their homes, except for one family, the Brophies. But in quick succession, the Brophy family's sheep all died, then the mother died of tuberculosis, then the 2 sons were accused of theft in a nearby town, and then they just disappeared, leaving one person, John Brophy, the father. But the Brophy family home burned to the ground, and so John, who was overcome with grief, just wandered off into the forest and was never heard from again. At that point, Dudleytown officially became a ghost town. No one lived there. And it was at that point in 1906 when Dr. Clark and Harriet had their beautiful summer's day walk through the forest and discovered where they wanted to build their second home. So fast forward back to 1918, and Dr. Clark, he's on his medical emergency leave to New York. It winds up being very quick. He's back on a train within 36 hours, and he pulls into the station right near Dark Entry Forest, and he's expecting to see Harriet waiting on the platform for him. But when the train rolled into the station, she wasn't there. Now, Dr. Clark was not a superstitious person, but for some reason, when he didn't see his wife there, he just felt like something was off. There's no reason she wouldn't have come out here to greet him. I mean, she was worried about being all alone in the cabin, and she knew he was going to be arriving at that moment. And so, feeling a little bit panicked, Dr. Clark left the train station and on foot made his way over to the Dark Entry Forest. And when he got there and began walking on that overgrown road path that led to his house, immediately, as soon as he was within the shade of the trees, he began hearing these owls hooting very loudly off in the distance. Now, normally, the sound of these owls hooting made him feel welcome, but this time he felt scared. He felt like something was wrong up ahead. And so he began jogging through the forest. And it's very dark, and all he can hear is the sound of these owls, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And then finally, he reaches the clearing where his property is. And at this point, it's a cacophony of owls hooting practically right on top of him. And he looks up towards his house up on this hill, and he sees the front door is slightly open. And so now, with his heart racing, wondering what's going on with his wife, Dr. Clark runs up to his front porch. He gets to the door and he flings it open the rest of the way. And then right before he stepped into his house, this sudden high-pitched noise began up on the second floor inside of his house. And it was so startling to Dr. Clark that he just froze where he was. And so suddenly it's so loud from the owls all around him and the woods behind him and whatever this noise is that he just stood there unsure what to do. And so as he's sitting there getting the courage up to go investigate his house, he realizes what this high-pitched noise is. It's the sound of maniacal, insane laughter coming from the second floor. Sensing his wife had to be in danger, the doctor charged up the nearby steps up to the second floor, and he could tell this laughter, this high-pitched laughter, was coming from the master bedroom. And so he ran down the short hallway. He got in front of the closed door that led into the master bedroom. He slowly opened it up, and there in the back corner of his room was his wife. She was on the ground, rolled up in a ball, facing the door. Her hands were clenched in fists. Her eyes were open and unblinking, and her mouth was open wider than was humanly possible. And as he's staring at his wife, wondering what's going on, he realizes this insane high-pitched laughter is coming from his wife. But it doesn't even look like it's coming out of her. Her chest is just heaving. Her mouth is staying open, and the laughter is just coming out of her. And so the doctor just stood there watching his wife, who's staring directly at his eyes. And finally, he just got so scared, he turned and he ran. During Dr. Clark's 36 hours he was away in New York, something happened to his wife. We don't know what it was, but it caused her to lose her mind. The only thing she would talk about was the strange creatures she saw out in the forest. By some accounts, Harriet spent the rest of her life in a mental asylum. By other accounts, she went back with Dr. Clark to New York, where she took her life. Today, Dudleytown is not only still abandoned, but it is also illegal to visit. However, people do still sneak into Dudleytown and walk around the ruins, and many of them have reported feeling these pockets of cold air where there shouldn't be cold air, and also some others have said as they've been walking, they've felt phantom hands slap them and push them. Some have said they've taken photographs inside of the Dark Entry Forest near Dudleytown, and they've captured strange, shadowy figures that they couldn't see with their naked eye. The famous paranormal couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren, shot a special series in the 1970s inside of the Dark Entry Forest, and they declared the area around Dudleytown was demonically possessed. Intensive of online FIFA, all new exclusive stories. The
Shit. So Next one. Okay, 1 minute, I'm loading a video. Let's see. Okay. So I think this will be the last video for today. Sure. Okay.
In April of 2020, a kid named Noah decided to go truck camping in the forests of Sun River, Oregon. He was driving down the road. He thought he found a good spot and drove deep into the forest with his truck. His first night there, he was woken up to sounds outside. As he continued listening, he realized they were footprints, and from the pattern, assumed it was a person. He grabbed his nearby GoPro and started filming.
I'm currently sleeping in the back of my truck right now. I don't even know what time it is. And there's someone in my truck
2:30 a.m.
right now. If you can hear that, it's pretty loud. He's been walking around for like 20 minutes already. I don't really know what to do. I'm a little freaked out right now. And
So from him
it's like
talking.
pitch black outside. And like, this doesn't make any sense because I parked somewhere where you couldn't see. No one was on that road. Wait, he's touching my truck. How am I supposed to get him away? He's literally knocking. He's literally knocking. He's on my truck.
Be quiet, then.
The canopy, the back door's locked. I can never get this scared forever. I don't think he knows that there's anyone in here.
Maybe he knows because you're talking so loud.
I'm so
Maybe
scared
not
right
so
now.
loud, but
He's literally peeking through the door right now.
Whoever was out there knocks on the truck and tries the door handles, all while Noah sits inside, forced to just listen to it happen. Fortunately, he had his doors locked, so no one could get inside. After multiple
That's
minutes,
good.
footsteps are finally heard leaving. When it got light outside, Noah drove back to the road and back home. Later that morning, he found handprints all over his truck, specifically on his back window from someone trying to see inside, and a lot on his door handles from someone trying to get inside.
maybe call police to check the DNA.
Handprints there, a lot of scratches,
What have we?
stuff like that. Dragging his finger on my side of my truck. Well, looks like to be
Did
trying to
move?
get inside my truck. That's really all I could tell from when he was walking around. More handprints trying to get in my truck. At least the back canopy was locked, but yeah, that was the result. So
For someone to even have been out there in the first place at that time of night is extremely odd. And it couldn't have
Yeah.
been a police officer or anything because no one identified themselves. The person didn't even have a light, and this was in the middle of a pitch black forest. No one ever posted an update on the situation, suggesting that he never found out who was outside his truck that night.
Because he
Kyle
was only
Burgess
one
was
night.
on an early morning jog on a trail in Provo, Utah, when he thought he saw a baby bobcat on the trail up ahead of him. He immediately pulled out his phone and started recording. But it wasn't a bobcat, rather it was a baby cougar. The video then shows the mother cougar coming into view.
I like this leaves.
Oh.
Look nice.
Oh. 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 No! Get the away! Get the away! Go! Go!
I don't
Go.
think she knows English.
No! Go away!
Maybe
Go away! Please
no,
go away!
she understands, but
Oh. Oh. Nice and slow. Come on. Ah!
it's fun.
No.
I mean, I probably also do the same thing, but you know, if you see she gets scared, or not gets scared, when you say no or stuff like that, she hesitates more. You can try maybe running at her, and then she'll get scared. I mean, it's not really, maybe it's not the smartest thing, but because I was never in this situation, so I don't really know. But I mean, yeah. Let's continue.
Kyle is left in a standoff with the cougar as he slowly backs away, trying to scare it off with loud noises. But the cougar continues to follow him, and at times even lunges at him. At one point, Kyle turns his head away from the animal so as not to trip as he's backing up. This prompts the cougar to try and attack, getting within only feet of him.
Go away! No! You taste, dude. Trying to attack and your eyes are looking away from you. Dude! No, go away! Go away!
Yeah.
No!
Well, I understand now.
No!
These things are beasts. These things are beasts. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, get away. Face.
Why did
The encounter lasts for an entire 6 minutes. It ends when Kyle throws a large rock, scaring the animal into running away. Cougar encounters with hikers are extremely dangerous and can often result in a much worse outcome. Had Kyle tried to run or failed to look and sound intimidating, the animal's instincts to chase and commit to an attack would have kicked in. In February of 2013, a few residents of a neighborhood in northern Oregon filed reports of strange noises coming from the forest. The noises were described as what sounded like eerie laughter. It was loud and echoed throughout the nearby area. One of the residents that heard the sounds went outside to where they seemed to be coming from and started recording.
Okay, that's creepy. Could have been a bird too. Sounds like a bit like a bird. But yeah. So yeah, it sounds like a bit like a human.
Some
but
think the
also
noises
like
are being
an
made by
animal.
foxes or coyotes.
Yeah.
Others don't think so, saying coyotes, for example, have a much more canine-like shriek and aren't nearly as loud. It's still unclear what exactly was making the noise that night. Lisa is a girl who owns a YouTube channel where she documents her life living in a van. She travels across North America recording her experience as she goes. The videos almost always follow more of a vlog style, showing the different forests or places she stays at overnight, or the journeys to get there. However, in February of 2022, something different was uploaded. Lisa was sleeping in her van when she woke up to the sound of knocking right next to her ear. It was 4:30 in the morning and someone was outside.
כן, אני אבוא עוד מעט. בטח עוד 10 דקות אולי. אני אכנס לדיסקורד. כן. אני אשלח לך תמונה. טוב, ביי.
גלעדי, אחרי שאני אשים את הילדים שלו, אני אשים פיג'מה ואז
כאילו,
אני לחכות,
בסדר, אולי, כאילו, זה בסדר, אולי בערך ב9 או משהו, 9:30, כאילו 9.
אני בטוחה שאני עדיין אהיה במצב ערות, אבל אם אני כן, אבל אפשר.
בסדר.
9 או 9:30?
כן, בערך.
אוקיי. אז אם זה יפריע לך אם אני אעלה משהו לפני כן, ואם אני עדיין אהיה...
בסדר.
9:30 אז ואם לא, אז אפשר לבוא.
אוקיי.
She sat there frozen.
So,
not knowing what to do. The knock then came again, and this time she uttered out a confused hello. There was no response. It would be completely silent for the next 15 minutes. Eventually, she heard footsteps coming back, and this time grabbed her camera to record.
Somebody's back here again. I hear footprints. Hello? How can I help you? It's 4:30 in the morning. I don't feel safe. Who are you?
There was no response. She quietly got up and went to the front of her van to look outside. In the distance, there were headlights. The car backs away, and so she turns the camera to herself and begins explaining what just happened. A few minutes into this, and she hears footsteps again.
I hear footprints. Hear that?
No.
Yeah, somebody was just here again 3 times now. The 3rd time I looked out, they were walking on foot. I seen them walking, and they hid behind the tree there, and then they went to a a car, the same car that was here earlier. Well, that was back, and then it backed away and left again 3 times in one night. This time, they didn't knock though. They were just walking around. I could hear them walking around the van.
When it got light outside later that morning, she got out of her van and found footprints all around it.
So I come out this morning and you can see footprints. Look at this one. This is mine. I'll show you. There's mine. See? They were actually, there's some more. Look at that. They came here. They were standing here, as you can see.
A lot of viewers believe the man was simply trying to steal valuables from the van. But why then come back 2 more times after you heard someone talking from inside? It's likely the man had worse intentions. This video was taken by a mountain biker in Vancouver, Canada. He had set up his phone camera to get a shot of him riding down a part of the mountain. Just as he comes down and passes the camera, he suddenly hits the brakes and starts calling out. He then comes back into frame, walking back up the mountain with his bike. As he does so, he keeps looking back behind him. Blocking his path was a bear, who was now following him.
Hey, hey. 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 Hey.
Well, it's a black bell. These black
The
bells
kid uses his bike
less
to make himself
dangerous.
look bigger. He hits it
Yeah.
on the ground a few times, causing the bear to retreat back to the camera where it knocks it over. The bear then stands over the camera for a while longer. Finally, it retreats completely, allowing the kid to retrieve his phone and get back to safety.
I think the black bells are
On September 6, 2016, a Reddit post was made linking to a video that claimed to feature a weird noise from the woods. Included was text that read, "I put the kids to bed tonight and heard this loud, really bizarre sound coming from the woods outside my house. It lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. We have a handful of neighbors nearby, but this was too loud to be coming from them. It seemed to be coming from the direction of a nearby AM radio tower. But can those towers make noises like this? I googled around but couldn't find anything similar." This is the video. Commenters immediately started speculating what the sound could have been. One of them suggested it could have been the sound of high winds passing through a nearby cell tower, the metal on metal being what created the eerie tone. But the poster replied saying there was almost no wind that night, and even on days when it was windy, he never heard this sound. Another said the sound was extremely consistent with what it sounds like to drill into a strut or support that's made of high carbon steel, but said that it would be weird to be doing this that late into the night. To this day, it's still unknown what the sound in the video actually is.
Might have been Siren Head. Did I say? Could have been Siren Head. Okay. Oh, forgot to turn it back on. Okay. Damn. Okay, that was a nice stream. Hold on now, and I will see you again next time. Bye.